Hey guys, Nick here, and today we will be getting into the finale of What If Eastman Survived, wrapping up the story of Eastman and what his character has meant to not only Morgan, but every character he's influenced since that fateful night of arriving at Alexandria, and summing up this 12-part series, shorter series than I've done in a long time, and making it something truly worth listening to and seeing. Now, we sum up right after seeing the infamous Pike scene and Eastman being the last victim, Morgan being the most influenced by this. Now, something we need to talk about, because this is very, 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 I cannot stress that enough, important for the character of Morgan and how much more Eastman has influenced him. In the original, when he died, sure, Morgan was upset and even attacked him because he knew that Eastman would die. But afterwards, he honored him. And honestly, he didn't become crazy again. He only became crazy for a second, but didn't become crazy again until Benjamin died. And then it was kind of a mix-mash until Morgan left Fear. But here, Eastman stuck around for 4 more seasons. 4! And that would have given Eastman so much more time around Morgan, making Morgan's character infinitely different in so many levels, especially with Eastman making a whole bunch of people from different communities being part and being around Morgan. I can't stress enough how much more Eastman would influence Morgan's life. So when he sees that head on the pike, Morgan instantly goes for his weapon and just starts losing it. Not killing anybody, because everyone stops him, but he's ready to go back and kill Alpha. But luckily everyone restrains him. Morgan, trying to hold any sanity that he can, grabs a mic or walkie-talkie or whatever and calls to every Aikido member that ever knew Eastman, and unfortunately has to break the news of Eastman and everyone else who has died, and says that nobody can understand truly how much Eastman not only meant to him, but everywhere else, the communities. And with Eastman gone, it really, really, really hurt him. He can't stress enough how important Eastman was to him, how it changed his life, turned him from a crazy lunatic after his son and wife died into something more, into a great person. With him dead, he doesn't know what to do now, but he does know one thing. Everyone who knew Eastman, everyone who cared about him, everyone who built upon the foundation of what he made, everyone who loved him, they must honor him and avenge him. And when the time becomes right, not today, not tomorrow, but they will kill Alpha. And they will make sure every remnant of the Whisperers, every remnant of their horde, everything that they strived for will be taken away from them, so that they will know beyond the pale what they took from Morgan and every person that cared about Eastman. And everyone agrees. And soon enough, winter comes and goes, with the whole exchange with the Kingdom and Hilltop not happening. And this isn't the first time that I've done this, because since the Saviors were significantly undermined, that means that the Kingdom is in great shape, as well as the Hilltop. So we don't have to worry about that. Soon enough, winter passes, and Morgan knows now more than ever If there is a time to strike, it's now. His patience has grown thin, much more thin than Carol's was when she lost Henry. And Morgan is done waiting. It's time to act. And Rick? Oh, he's going to be on board with this 100%. Because after the Claimers, after Terminus, almost right when Pete became a problem, Rick thought he lost it too. Eastman's what helped him come back. Even if it was just a little bit, it helped him come back. And now they're ready to get an army to engage Alpha and avenge Eastman. Morgan and Rick hold the rear, with Michonne, Daryl, Abraham, Sasha, and many more following. Pete, Carol, Carl, Ron, Rosita, Gabriel, Jesus, who's literally a god in this what if, Aaron, Enid, Negan, and the entirety of his saviors, Jadis and all of her people. And Tara finally finds it in her, because this is an emergency. This is the right time to finally bring Oceanside into the fold. Sorry, yawning. And it has been a long time since she even thought about Oceanside, since when the Saviors were technically still a problem. And after Tara explains every little detail about what's happened, Oceanside's finally found peace after so long. Think about it, this would have been 7 years in the future. So Oceanside, they actually feel comfortable with joining. Now, the thought of joining with the Saviors still bugs them, especially Natanya. But now that they're not the threat, it's fine. Natanya's definitely kind of still against it, but Cindy and Tara kind of uphold her. So, it's all good. Ezekiel, Shiva, and the entirety of the kingdom joins the fold as well. Along with Jerry, Benjamin, who is still alive, Henry, and Lydia, who've officially become a full-time couple. And that's not the first time that I've done that either. Henry has lived in plenty of my other what-ifs before. And with that, we have our army. Rick makes a speech before they engage. And they all look towards the horizon, where they know they're about to engage Alpha and her army. Rick makes a speech, half of what he did at the end of Season 8, where he tells everyone that they are life, and Alpha and her horde are death, except he emphasizes upon Alpha. And this is what a bunch of us thought we were going to get before Andrew Lincoln left the show. I guarantee it. But this time, Rick emphasizes more on Eastman's standard, and that they all must stand together and honor Eastman to 100-fold. And then Morgan makes a speech, saying, once again, if it weren't for Eastman, he wouldn't be the man that he is today. He would still be on a dark path in Atlanta, or God knows where. He would be most likely dead, or imprisoned, or both. He wouldn't be the better man that he is. People here would probably be dead. Pete, Owen, many others. They would not have changed their ways. People here, Eastman meant so much to everyone and anyone involved. And in order to honor him, in order to remember him, in order to avenge him, Alpha and any remnant of her army must and will be expunged. And soon enough, they approach the Whisperer camp, but they don't get far, before the satellite comes from the sky and crashes into the same forest area in which it does in the original story, halting their progress. But thankfully, things might seem dark at the moment, and everyone is sort of around the area to see this happen. And, thankfully, with a bunch of people, even though walkers begin to approach the area, I'm really sorry doing this late. Walkers begin to approach the area. But, thankfully, along with many, 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 many people able to put out the fire, there's also a lot of people and ammunition and people. So Rick, all he has to do is raise a hand, and every walker in the area is instantly trounced, not putting half a mark in their ammunition. Alpha and the Whisperers soon make themselves known. And this, everyone can feel that this moment, you could cut the tension with a knife. It is that big. Alpha and several Whisperers stand in the front of the Whisperer army, as well as a few walkers, with Rick and Morgan standing in front of their army, staring into Alpha with cold, dead, menacing eyes, showing that this is the moment they've been waiting for. This is the moment that will decide everything. Alpha stares at them with just as menacing eyes, saying that it didn't have to come to this. They could have just left well enough alone after she said what she said to Rick. But Beta, she was her number 2. And they should be thankful that she didn't kill more, because honestly, she should have. And if this is about that old man, about the others, like she said, she could have killed more. But she didn't. And they are all fools for coming here, engaging her, coming to her land. She should have killed more. And now? Originally, at this point, she would have said there would be no bloodshed, like she did in the original story. But now, because especially losing her number 2, because of everything, there will be bloodshed. And this time, it won't just be over 15 victims. It will be every single one of them. Until every one of them either joins her horde or is left with nothing but bones on the ground. And then she shoots up into the air with her medieval shotgun, or whatever you want to call it. She shoots up into the air. And at first, nothing happens. And some of the group, not many, but some, are confused. But soon enough, terror, confusion, and utter fear is in every one of their eyes. As from the bushes, the trees, and the land itself begins to crack open, and from it emerges a monstrous horde, so much so that Rick even gets fearful, because this horde is 300 times bigger than the horde that he saw in the valley. Alpha and the Whisperers bring it towards the group, with fear and utter terror approaching every one of their eyes, as Alpha and the Whisperers begin to fall back and engage the horde towards Rick, Morgan, and every single one of the group that is involved. Rick knows, or at least he thought he knew, that the horde, the Whisperers, and every one of them would be a terror amongst all of them. But he didn't think about this. He didn't know that it would be this big. But they can't abandon ship now. They can't retreat, and they sure as crap cannot dishonor Eastman and every single person that they've come here to avenge. He knows that much. So, he looks down for a moment, but only for a moment, that unsurefulness of himself beginning to weigh on his mind. But then he looks up straight at the horde with menacing, cold eyes. And then he slightly smirks and turns back to every single person of his army and pulls back his head, prepares his lungs, and shouts at a high voice that strains his lungs to the point where it begins to strain his throat, and yells, "Now!" at the top of his lungs, so much so that he can barely speak after. And every single one of the people involved launch back their guns, arrows, whatever weapons at their disposal, and fire straight at the horde. And this is the biggest battle that would ever result in a story or any part of The Walking Dead that you would ever see in your life. But it's not enough. After 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes of shooting consistently, they'd thought that the battle would be over. But it's not. After every single bullet and ammunition and arrow is used up, the horde still looks monstrous. And that horde that the wolves brought unexpectedly to Alpha's doorstep, some of them begin to connect the dots that maybe that made it here. 25% of it, actually. Some of them begin to calculate that in their heads, Rick being one of them. And he knew from how big it looked that some of it would survive, but he didn't think that it would still be this big. And that unsurefulness in him begins to weigh on him even more. But he still thinks, he still knows they can't turn back. They mustn't turn back, because turning back would dishonor everything that they've stood for since Eastman appeared at their doorstep, since that group in Atlanta, since he found his family. And with that, they drop every gun and arrow and launcher that they have and begin to pick up every melee weapon they have. Axe, machete, everything, and begin to run. And then sprint, and then launch themselves towards the rest of the horde. But unfortunately, now we begin to get losses. Almost every savior that is left is lost. Almost every Jadis member is lost, the scavengers. And then we get major losses. Tara, Jared, Gavin, Shiva, Ron. But the horde is finally dealt with. But it did not come without a price. And that's emphasized further after the horde is finally dealt with, when a singular final shotgun shot rings out. And its unfortunate maker, or meter, with the shot is Pete, living longer than any iteration of him would ever come to live in a story or just an entirety of The Walking Dead. But this time, he actually meant something. He carried Eastman's name as long as he could. And he meant a lot to keep many, if not just monstrous amounts of the group alive in Eastman's name. And Alpha and the Whisperers step out, finally making themselves known, and smiling at the group, knowing that their horde did monstrous damage to Rick and Morgan's army. And Rick is now beginning to feel very unsure of himself. But then Ezekiel steps up, pulling every bit of King ounce of his King Ezekiel motives that he can. Even though Shiva has died, many of his kingdom has died, Benjamin is still alive, Henry is still alive, And he carries this with every ounce of his being, saying how much Eastman has meant to him and carried his king name even further, and that their army will not fall, not on this day. And this would make even Morgan stand up from his clearing moments, whatever he was bouncing to, but he still wishes to avenge Eastman. And that they will not falter, they will not abandon ship, and they will fight back with whatever they have until every ounce of the Whisperers is gone forever. And Rick, this makes him pluck up courage. This makes him bounce back and deliver one final speech before they bounce forward, giving him a Season 8 opening speech, saying that if they start tomorrow right now, no matter what comes next, they have already won, and they will win right now. And every person that's alive, which is still a monstrous amount, by the way, agrees and shouts to the high heavens and marches forward with whatever strength that they have left, engaging the Whisperers. And, surprisingly, even though a lot of them, including main members, still get injured, they are still able to engage successfully and win against every one of the Whisperers. Yes, the rest of the main saviors are killed, as well as Jesus' people, but no main characters are lost anymore. Daryl is the main one to engage Alpha, and him alone. And yeah, we all know how Daryl engaged Alpha alone. The only reason he didn't kill Alpha in that moment in the original was because the Whisperers were around him, as well as walkers. So, with Alpha just alone, Daryl is able to completely outclass her in every sense of direction. And as soon as Alpha can't fight back anymore, and is about to deliver any kind of attack to at least damage Daryl, Morgan finishes the job, making sure Alpha's last moments are slow, painful, agonizing, and completely erase her from existence. And at that moment, any remnant of the Whisperers, their horde, their memories, their army, are completely destroyed and just pummeled from any part of the area. Afterwards, the communities are what we must talk about. The junkyard and the sanctuary are completely abandoned, with no remnants of the army remaining except the leaders, Negan and Jadis. As for the others, the kingdom and the hilltop, while losing a significant amount of their fighters, they still have plenty of their people and fighters, including Benjamin, Henry, Lydia, people like that. So, their communities remain intact, especially considering the fact, like I said, the Savior's threat was significantly undermined. So, of course it would remain around. Well, they would remain around afterwards, and after the army has been completely dealt with. The people try to get back to peace, and it's a lot easier than many of you might think, although many of them have to mourn the loss of not only the people that were lost on the pikes, but Eastman, especially Eastman. Eugene works on the radioing to try and get their places back intact. Well, not as much intact as they were damaged in the original, but intact enough, the little damages that they got, which aren't significant. I must stress again, it's not really a big deal like it was in canon. Soon enough, that leads to the same group going out, meeting Princess, and meeting the Commonwealth. But it's really not a big deal, so they can stay longer, because like I said, it's really not a big deal as it was in canon. Now, let's talk about Maggie and Glenn and their son Herschel, which Glenn is alive for, like I've made happen before, except Maggie is around. I either did that with What If Madison's Family Joined Rick or another story, I can't remember. But unfortunately, Glenn being around for the Reapers means his untimely demise at the first Reaper that they come across and successfully manage to overpower. But that Reaper, unfortunately, blows himself up, and Glenn is caught in the crossfire and unfortunately meets his end. But he did live significantly longer than he did in canon, and that's not the first time that I've done that. Now, the tunnel scene would not happen because there would be no need for them to go. Because I must stress again, and this is very, 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 very important. That truck in a few parts ago that met Jesus for the first time, that saved their lives for season 10 and 11, especially in this story. Because were it not for that truck, they would have all had the same situation that they did in canon. But that truck saved a huge amount of people's lives. I can't stress that enough. And I know I might be sounding like a broken record, but as very important for the safety of all communities, especially with Kingdom and Hilltop still around. But soon enough, when Maggie returns with the Wardens, she tells everyone about the Reapers and hears about the Whisperers and their significantly undermined threat, even though Eastman and plenty of other people were lost. And she talks about going in and going to Meridian and attacking them head on. That's not the first time I've done that either. And now me knowing more that she wanted to do that originally makes it even more likely that Rick would want to agree with it, especially after what they just dealt with the Whisperers. And they once again build an army, since they are still plenty stocked on what they have, with Rick, Michonne, Morgan, Aaron, Jesus, Daryl, Carol, Benjamin, and sorry if I'm going a little slow, Henry, Lydia, Abraham, and Sasha, Carl, Enid, Rosita, Gabriel, and Negan. And with that, we have our army, restocked from their battle with the Whisperers and ready to go to Meridian for hopefully one final battle. And with that, we get to Meridian, getting close, but not quite, into the dead of night, where the Reapers were supposedly always supposed to attack. But going straight to their home, of course they're going to be out, even if it was day. And with that, the Reapers make themselves known. And this would be just as dark, if not slightly, maybe a little bit less than as dark as when they fought against the Whisperers. Now, Cole, as I've made happen before, takes the death of the old man that died right whenever they got out of the tunnel. So not too big a deal. Duncan takes the death of Cole, since they didn't really matter too much, but they at least mattered a little bit. So, of course they would die around this point. Then we get to the major deals, which the Reaper fights. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a repeat here, except it's going to be different people fighting for the most part. Aaron takes the place of Gabriel, killing the first Reaper, Nicole's. Maggie fights Turner, like she did in the original. Except this time, when Negan saves her, it's much different, and a much different feel with Negan and Maggie not really hating each other. And the difference is that Negan doesn't have a crowbar, and he doesn't have the bat that Brandon gave him. He still has his Lucille, so it's much, much different. Morgan kills the next Reaper, the Reaper that Pope threw in the fire, Bossy, which is a weird name for a Reaper, I just noticed, really. But really, who cares? Now, Carol kills the next Reaper, Wells, in a kind of tough fight, yet not really. I don't feel that it would be too difficult. One, because it's Carol, and two, because of how Wells was really introduced. Then we get to a scene that I've done before. Daryl meeting Leah for the first time, as well as Dog, and Leah trying to cinch Dog upon Daryl, finding out that Dog won't attack Daryl and actually prefers him more, ending up with Leah's untimely demise in a futile attempt to get Dog to do the work for her, which I've had happen in multiple stories. Michonne killing the next Reaper, with Rosita following suit. The next Reaper, however, unfortunately, doesn't get an easy death. Actually, it becomes a hard duel, but he actually takes out the likes of Benjamin. Benjamin living longer than any iteration I have ever had him live. But he at least did significant damage to the Reaper in whom he fought. So, at least in this story, he fought more and better than any version I have yet made. Henry and Lydia being somewhat close in the area and avenging Benjamin's death almost immediately, with Benjamin being alive to see them do this, but unfortunately dying in the end. The next two Reapers, taken out by Carl and Enid, whose relationship has advanced very much so than probably most of my stories, yet not really. I've had them be alive and have a relationship even past this point. Carl's still unfortunately losing his eye right at this point and being significantly injured, as well as Enid, except she doesn't lose her eye. Daryl killing the likes of Austin next, like he does in canon. Same with Gabriel killing the priest of the Reapers, like he did in canon. And with this, the last two major Reapers being killed by the likes of Abraham and Sasha with little to kind of middle difficulty. Then we get to a significant fight. Jesus and Carver. Now this is very, very, very important, because if I have not mentioned enough, Jesus is superhuman with Aikido and his already high potent combat efficiency, being Black Widow, Marvel type strong, making him the strongest character in The Walking Dead, and immediately getting the upper hand this time instead of Carver, being opposite of any version of them that I've had encounter each other in any story that Jesus has lived. And as soon as the fight begins, Brandon thinks that this is going to be kind of easy, maybe a little difficult. But then he realizes that this is actually getting difficult, and he actually has to get serious, or he might actually end up dying to this actually very potent combat guy. And it's not just his combat maneuvers. His skills with weapons are actually dangerous and lethal. But soon enough, he begins to realize that he's missing more and more and more. And then he realizes this guy, Jesus, if that's what his real name is toying with him. And he begins missing more and more and more and more. And now Carver is actually getting scared. He's actually beginning to fear for his life. And this would be a new experience for any iteration of Carver that we would ever see. Because for the first time in any story or any version of his life, Carver can't do anything. And soon enough, Jesus, with his combat skills, with his sword, with his Aikido all potented in one fell meteor combination, stealing a little quote from Goku's move there, he takes out Carver in one single combat stroke, using his sword, his staff with the Aikido maneuvers, and his combat skills, and killing Carver right then and there, right after Carver started fearing for his life. Afterwards, Rick and Elijah, tag team Pope, avenging Elijah's sister, and avenging everyone that they lost in the fight, Benjamin being the main one, and Carl almost dying. Afterwards, they think that every battle that they've ever been in is over. But that's before the Commonwealth introduces themselves. But really, it's not even close to a problem. Because they really don't need the Commonwealth. Oh, by the way, Maze and Virgil are brought into the mix, but because of what I've done with them before, and the story's not really making them matter too much, if Maze was brought in, especially for the Reapers, he wouldn't really do much. As for Virgil, we all know how Rick being around would deal with him, so really, they don't matter. And as for the Commonwealth, like I said, with that truck, and with what they've gotten, with the Saviors being on their side, and with Rick, Michonne, and Abraham around, the Commonwealth is just there as a backup option. And with main people like them around, and with Abraham around, they would rise to power against the likes of Lance and Pamela very, very, very quickly. And Abraham would even get Mercer to rise to power even quicker, which means that any sort of threat against the Commonwealth would be far and just very undermined. I can't really stress that enough. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but it really doesn't matter. And with that, Morgan and even Commonwealth members, and going on to other communities, forthwith would honor Eastman's legacy, name, character, and tutelage, and even getting more and more and more members. So that way, Eastman's name, across many years, past before he, passed, would never forget him. And Morgan would never forget the man who changed him from a crazy lunatic into a fine student and a better man. And this all could have happened if Eastman survived that bite from the man whose walker Morgan didn't put down. And that's where we leave things and complete the story of what if Eastman survived. I truly and 110% hope that you guys enjoyed this story. I really didn't think that in just 12 parts, I would make Eastman survive more than any good person, any real version of him, or any guy I have yet made survive in this story. But that's going to be very different for What If Dale Survived remake, and yet not different, if you guys get what I mean. Dale's going to matter a lot more than he did in my story originally, or any version of him, but making him survive just to the governor, spoiler alerts, is going to make it very influential going on. And I really hope that you guys will enjoy that story coming up, and really enjoyed this story as a whole. And with that, stay tuned for What If Dale Survived the remake coming up here soon. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this story. I will see you guys next time.
I carry within me the pride of a prince!